This is the SpaceX Starship, humanity's first genuine attempt at an interplanetary moving van. Standing 50 meters tall with a diameter of 9 meters, it's the largest spacecraft ever designed to land on another world. In just a few years, this gleaming steel tower will carry the first human beings to Mars, launching them on a journey that will redefine what it means to be human. It's not just transportation. It's a self-contained world that must sustain life for 3 years in the most hostile environment our species has ever deliberately entered. Everything about it screams ambition, from its revolutionary full-flow staged combustion engines to its complete reusability. This is the vessel that's supposed to make humanity multiplanetary. But here's the truth nobody wants to discuss at the Mars Society conferences. Living inside Starship for the journey to Mars will be one of the most psychologically and physically challenging experiences any human has ever endured. Forget the glossy concept art of spacious lounges with panoramic windows. Forget the idea of floating gracefully through cathedral-like spaces while Earth shrinks behind you. The reality is that you'll be trapped in a series of cramped, windowless decks that smell like a gym locker crossed with a machine shop. You'll eat the same recycled food, breathe the same recycled air, and stare at the same faces for 26 months. By the time you reach Mars, you'll either be bonded like family or ready to murder each other. Possibly both. So, if we're really going to send people to Mars in this thing, not in some distant sci-fi future, but in this decade, what does daily life actually look like inside? How do you fit homes, offices, gyms, kitchens, and everything else needed for human survival into a space smaller than a suburban house? How do you keep people sane when they can't go outside for 3 years? And most critically, how do you design an interior that can withstand the violence of launch, the weightlessness of cruise, and the controlled crash that SpaceX calls a landing? When Elon Musk first unveiled Starship in 2016, back when it was called ITS, the interior concepts were breathtaking. The entire upper section, all 1,000 cubic meters of it, would be an open-plan paradise. Imagine a space cathedral with 40-foot ceilings, wraparound windows showing the cosmos, and enough room for zero-gravity sports. The renders showed elegant spiraling staircases, communal areas with trees, yes, trees, and private cabins with windows larger than those on the ISS. It was supposed to be the Orient Express of space travel, making the journey to Mars not just bearable but enjoyable. SpaceX even talked about movie theaters, restaurants, and observation domes. That dream lasted exactly as long as it took to start actually testing the vehicle. The first reality check came during the infamous RUD era, Rapid Unscheduled Disassembly, SpaceX's euphemism for explosions. Between 2020 and 2021, Starship prototypes kept failing during the landing flip maneuver. SN8 crashed. SN9 crashed. SN10 landed, then exploded. SN11 exploded mid-air. The problem? Fuel sloshing. During that critical flip from horizontal to vertical, the fuel in the main tanks would slosh away from the engine intakes, causing engine failures. The solution was elegant but costly. Move the landing fuel to header tanks in the nose cone, where it would remain stable during the flip. It worked. SN15 finally stuck the landing. But it meant the entire nose cone, that beautiful pointed cathedral ceiling with panoramic windows, was now full of methane and liquid oxygen. The crew just lost their penthouse. To understand why this change was non-negotiable, you need to visualize what happens during landing. Starship falls through the atmosphere belly first, using its entire body as an air brake. Then, at about 500 meters altitude, it fires its engines and performs what SpaceX calls The flip and burn, rotating 90 degrees in about 6 seconds while under power. The bottom of the rocket swings around like the weight on a grandfather clock, experiencing lateral accelerations of up to 3 Gs. Any liquid down there, fuel, water, or human stomach contents, gets violently thrown sideways. By moving the landing fuel to the nose, which barely moves during the flip, SpaceX solved the sloshing problem. But they also signed the death warrant for those beautiful observation windows. The crew would now live in a windowless tube, relying on screens for any view of the outside universe. Just when it seemed like the interior design was stabilizing, SpaceX dropped another bombshell in 2024, Starship V2. From the outside, V2 looked bigger, 2 meters taller, promising more room for crew and cargo. But the interior told a different story. To achieve the performance needed to actually reach orbit with meaningful payload, SpaceX extended the main propellant tanks upward by 2 meters into what was supposed to be the crew compartment. It's like buying a bigger house only to discover the previous owner converted half the bedrooms into a swimming pool. The habitable volume actually decreased from about 550 cubic meters to 500. The crew compartment was literally being squeezed between the growing fuel tanks below and the header tanks above, compressed like the filling in a sandwich. Let's put 500 cubic meters in perspective. It sounds spacious until you start doing the math. A typical American house has about 2,000 cubic meters of volume. So we're talking about 1/4 of a house for up to 12 people for 3 years. The International Space Station, often criticized for being cramped, offers 916 cubic meters for a crew of 7. That's 130 cubic meters per person. Starship to Mars? You're looking at 42 cubic meters per person if you pack in 12 crew members. That's not living space. That's total space, including the bathroom, kitchen, gym, and workspace. It's like asking someone to live in a large RV for 3 years. Except the RV is falling through space, and you can't open the windows. Fortunately, NASA has studied exactly how much space humans need to not go insane on long-duration missions. Their 2013 Mars Transit Habitat Study concluded that for a 2.5-year mission, each crew member needs an absolute minimum of 25 cubic meters of habitable volume. Not personal space, just general volume to exist in. Below that threshold, psychological breakdown becomes probable, not possible. The study documented what happens in confined spaces: increased cortisol levels, sleep disruption, cognitive decline, and something called irrational antagonism. Basically, you start hating your crewmates for how they breathe. Using NASA's guidelines, Starship could theoretically support 20 people. But that's assuming the entire volume is usable, which it definitely isn't. Here's what eats up that precious volume that nobody thinks about. First, you need floors, at least 8 decks to make the space usable in both zero-G and Mars gravity. That's 16 meters of floor-ceiling sandwiches, each one eating 20 centimeters of height. Then walls to separate spaces, because nobody wants to sleep next to the toilet or exercise next to the kitchen. Add a central access shaft with a ladder, elevator system. There goes another 4 square meters per deck. Environmental systems need to run somewhere. Air ducts, water pipes, electrical conduits, all hidden in the walls but consuming volume. Storage for 3 years of supplies, spare parts, and personal items. By the time you account for all of this infrastructure, your 500 cubic meters of theoretical space becomes maybe 300 cubic meters of actually habitable volume. For 12 people, that's 25 cubic meters each, right at NASA's psychological breakdown threshold. So here's what the actual interior layout looks like today. Based on SpaceX's latest design iterations and NASA's habitability requirements. Deck 1, the lowest level, is entirely consumed by the airlock and EVA preparation room, essential for Mars surface operations but dead space during transit. Deck 2 is cargo storage and life support machinery, oxygen generators, water recyclers, and the equipment that keeps everyone alive. You don't live here. You just hope it never breaks. Deck 3 and 4 are crew quarters, tiny coffin-sized bunks that would make submarine sailors claustrophobic. Each crew member gets approximately 2.5 cubic meters of personal space, smaller than a phone booth. Privacy is a curtain. Silence is impossible with 11 other people breathing, snoring, and existing inches away. Deck 5 serves as the galley and common area, the only place where the entire crew can gather simultaneously, though gather is generous when you're shoulder to shoulder around a table designed for 6. The kitchen isn't really a kitchen, it's a wall of food warmers and a water dispenser. No fresh food after month 1. No cooking smells to remind you of home. Just endless variations of freeze-dried packets that all taste vaguely like cardboard with seasoning. Deck 6 is the gym and medical bay, a bizarre combination until you realize that in space, exercise isn't optional recreation, it's medical treatment. Without 2.5 hours of daily exercise, your bones dissolve and your muscles atrophy. The gym is 3 resistance machines and a treadmill that requires you to be strapped in with bungee cords. But here's the deck that nobody talks about, but everyone needs. Deck 7, the workspace. NASA's studies showed that the single greatest predictor of psychological stability on long-duration missions isn't privacy or comfort. It's meaningful work. Humans need purpose, especially when trapped in a tin can hurtling through the void. So Deck 7 becomes the office, laboratory, and workshop. It's where crew members will spend 8 to 10 hours a day maintaining the ship, conducting experiments, planning Mars operations, and doing whatever busy work Mission Control invents to keep them from going crazy. Without this deck, without work to do, the crew would psychologically disintegrate within months. Boredom in space isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. It leads to depression, aggression, and what psychologists call cognitive dysfunction, where you literally become too apathetic to perform basic survival tasks. Deck 8, the flight deck, sits at the very top of the habitable area for one crucial reason: the landing flip maneuver. Remember that pendulum swing we discussed? When Starship transitions from belly flop to tail-down landing, the bottom of the ship experiences accelerations that would turn your internal organs into soup. But the top, where the flight deck is, barely moves. It's the eye of the hurricane, the calm center of rotation. During those critical 30 seconds of landing, the crew will be strapped into acceleration couches on Deck 8, experiencing maybe 2 Gs instead of the 6 Gs they'd face at the bottom. It's the difference between discomfort and death. The placement isn't about having the best view for piloting. There are no windows anyway. It's about surviving the violence of landing with your skeleton intact. But here's where this story takes a turn toward hope. SpaceX isn't stopping at V2. Starship V3, already in development, extends the vehicle to 69 meters. Nice, adding 17 meters of length. Yes, bigger fuel tanks will consume some of this space, but even conservative estimates suggest V3 will offer 801,000 cubic meters of habitable volume. That transforms everything. Suddenly you can have actual privacy, real recreation spaces, maybe even those windows Musk originally promised. The psychological difference between 25 cubic meters per person, survival, and 50 cubic meters per person, livability, cannot be overstated. It's the difference between enduring the journey to Mars and actually being functional when you arrive. But here's the genius twist that makes all this cramped suffering worthwhile. Starship isn't just your ride to Mars. It's your first home when you get there. Those cramped crew quarters? They become private offices for planning colony construction. The galley becomes mission control for surface operations. The gym becomes a maintenance workshop for Mars rovers and equipment. The cargo bay transforms into an airlock for daily EVAs. For the first 6 to 12 months on Mars, while the crew constructs permanent habitats, Starship is their castle, their fortress, against an environment that kills you in seconds if you make one mistake. Every claustrophobic corner, every recycled breath, every freeze-dried meal endured during transit pays off when Starship becomes the seed from which Mars City grows. And here's the detail that SpaceX doesn't advertise, but everyone going to Mars needs to understand. You're not a passenger, you're a contractor. Your ticket to Mars comes with a work agreement. Those first crews won't be tourists or even traditional astronauts. They'll be construction workers with PhDs, plumbers with astro-engineering degrees, electricians who can also perform surgery. The Starship interior isn't designed for comfort, because comfort isn't the mission. The mission is to build a self-sustaining city on a dead world, and Starship is just the tool to get the job done. Every design decision, from the placement of the flight deck to the size of the workspace, is optimized not for the journey, but for what happens after landing.